there are two things that you need to know right off the bat. First, a float is an approximate numeric value, with the key being approximate here. So as you do this conversion, you might run into unexpected things with rounding or truncation even, depending on your data set and what you're trying to do with it. But Varchar, Care Bear Stare is just a abbreviation that stands for variable length character. You do need to be aware of a length when you're going through this conversion process. Let's jump into what to do with this information real quick. I'd give this data set a 3 out of 10 on Might Give You a Headache scale. It's pretty clean, it's pretty small. But let's say I have a request for this refund or credit amount to add it in a USD designation and money sign symbol, just for a random report request, so we have a good scenario to play with here. Let's look at the column setup first. I want to confirm that it's even a float. I just want to note the precision in that case, meaning how many decimals there are. So when I mess around with this, I am looking at my playground database. That's what this is, a playground. And then I'm pulling out a few attributes to, numeric precision, numeric scale, using some standard SQL Server methodology here, but then table name and then the column name that I want to get to. And when I run that, I now have numeric precision and the scale, so I get a sense of what I'm looking at. So it's already a decimal value and such. First off, I want to run through a couple of options as like some basic level conversion. And I'm just going to pull out a top 5 just so that we can see what we're looking at, but I want to look at the column I want to impact next to 2 different options. So this basic conversion is throwing out a cast. The Varchar at 20 is because of the 18 that I had in that precision just a moment ago. I know that I'm covered with that. And then next to that, I want to look at the top 5 with a format statement instead of the cast. So that's really the difference here. And this N2 represents the number of values past the decimal point. So just doing a basic cast or a format, what are we going to get? When I run that, the 2 of them together, so the top one being the cast version, and then the bottom one is the format version. And this is the standard next to the converted values. So the conversion looks very similar to the refund or credit amount. If we were to actually update the table and add a new column converted value, it would just show as a Varchar versus the original shows as a decimal. The formatted value is really getting to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I would actually recommend just starting with format to flesh this out further and start looking at the different, like where we can turn this into a string value and combining this information. I'm going to do the same thing here. I've got a top 5 for illustration. The refund or credit amount, I'm still using that format with an N2, but I'm going to add a space USD verbiage and call this appended value, so we can kind of start looking at the differences here. I'm just going to select this and run that by itself, and now we're getting that 82.78 US dollars. Now let's actually show this as currency. So instead of the N2, we can break out format, because in this case, this float was actually meant to represent a dollar amount. We can actually use the C to represent currency instead of the numeric with 2 decimals. And then we're going to call it English US. You have different options on what that looks like if you're not trying to do it with a US dollar format. But I still want to go ahead and add in that space with a USD to fully get the format. When I run this, now we're getting currency value with the USD. So this is ultimately what I was trying to get to from the start. You also have to make sure that especially if you're using cast, that your data type that you're trying to convert it to is actually long enough to receive it. And that's why at the start of this, I did go through an exercise to double check. You can also look at that inside of your Object Explorer and SQL Server Management Studio, where I can go down to this refund and credit amount, and I can see that it's a decimal with the 18,10, and then it does accept null values. You'll definitely want that information. So what happens is when you run it, you'll see overflow converting numeric data type to Varchar. In other SQL management systems, you might not have this come out. It just might truncate it, which is going to impact your end results and the precision that you're ultimately trying to achieve there. So just kind of be aware of that. And for SQL Server, it threw out an error. So if I convert it back to that 20, then we're in business like we were in that first example. Converting from float to Varchar is more than just a report display feature. You could also update tables and such. And when you're doing that, you really want to be careful and make sure that you're preserving the integrity of your data. You're not trying to change it in unexpected ways. So subscribe so that we can talk through some more of the SQL quirks that we have to deal with our sometimes hard to handle requests that come through, or fire drills.